One morning, I left for work at 6:30. When I came back at 4 in the afternoon, there was fresh, black asphalt where my gravel used to be, a brand new decorative fence cutting 8 feet into my property, and my neighbor's silver SUV sitting on top of it like a trophy. They hadn't asked. They hadn't waited for paperwork. They hadn't even left a note. They just built over it while I was gone, and apparently assumed I'd look at it, do the math, and decide it wasn't worth the fight. What they didn't account for was 15 cubic yards of mulch, 10 tons of gravel, a bright blue portable toilet, and a property attorney named Linda who said 4 words when I walked into her office and dropped their lawsuit on her desk. She said, "Good, that speeds things up." I bought my place 9 years ago, back when interest rates were still reasonable, and the neighborhood felt like the kind of place where people borrowed sugar instead of hiring attorneys. Corner lot just outside Columbus, Ohio. Nothing special. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, a detached garage that leans a little when the wind hits it right. What sold me on the house was the driveway. Wide gravel wraparound that ran along the side yard and opened up behind the fence. I run a small landscaping company, just me and 2 guys in the busy season. A pickup, a trailer, mowers, mulch deliveries, pallets of stone. That driveway meant I could park everything without blocking the street or bothering anyone. I kept it clean, no junk, no oil stains. I took genuine pride in it for years. Nobody ever said a word. Then the Callaways moved in next door. Brent and Elise Callaway, mid-40s, sharp clothes, matching silver SUVs, the kind of couple that looks like they walked straight out of a home renovation commercial. They bought the old Ramirez place for almost double what it had sold for 5 years earlier, and within weeks, the contractors showed up. New siding, black-framed windows, white stone facade, perfectly symmetrical shrubs. The whole thing. I was standing at my mailbox one evening when Brent came over the first time. Crisp polo shirt, loafers without socks, hand extended like we were closing a business deal. "Hey there, neighbor. Brent Callaway. We're really excited to elevate the feel of this street." That was the word he chose, elevate. I told him my name, welcomed him to the neighborhood. He nodded toward my truck and trailer. "You run a business out of here?" I told him landscaping kept me busy. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Gotcha. Well, I'm sure we'll all work together to keep things looking clean." I should have heard it right then. That polite, measuring tone. Over the next couple of months, comments started floating over the fence. Never directly, just loud enough. "That truck's pretty big for a residential street, don't you think? Is that equipment stored overnight? I thought there were neighborhood guidelines." There weren't. No HOA. That was one of the reasons I bought here. But Brent clearly missed having one. The real issue showed itself one Saturday when they hosted a dinner party and one of their guests had parked a BMW halfway across the mouth of my driveway. I knocked on their door. Elise answered with a wine glass in her hand. "One of your guests is blocking my drive." She turned her head and called over her shoulder, "Brent, it's about the parking." He appeared behind her, already annoyed. "It's just for a few hours. We've got limited space." "You've got your driveway," I said. "This is mine." He gave me that tight smile. "Your driveway extends pretty far over toward our side." "It extends exactly where the property line is." He tilted his head slightly. "Are you sure about that?" That was the first flicker of something that wasn't just irritation. It was a warning. The orange cones showed up a week later. 3 of them, placed right along the gravel near what Brent had apparently decided was the dividing line. Not on his grass, on my gravel. I got out of my truck, stared at them for about 30 seconds, then moved them onto his lawn. Didn't throw them, just set them down gently. 10 minutes later, he was knocking on my door. "We're thinking that side section of the driveway makes sense as shared access," he said. "You've got plenty of depth back there, and we need overflow parking when we host." "It's not shared," I said. "It's deed." We had a guy take a look. "Looks like that stretch actually falls within our boundary." I almost laughed. "Then show me the survey." "It's being finalized." "Which means you don't have one." His smile disappeared completely. "We'll see about that." And that was when things stopped being neighborly. The morning I came home to the asphalt, I sat in my truck for a full minute with the engine running. You know that feeling where your brain tries to convince you you're misreading what you're seeing? That maybe you parked wrong, or you're forgetting something, or you're overreacting? And then the reality settles in, clear and heavy, and you understand that what you're looking at is exactly what it looks like. They didn't ask. They didn't wait. They just built over it. I walked straight to their door. Elise answered, same wine glass, like it was part of the uniform. Your husband paved over my driveway and fenced off my property, I said, keeping my voice even. She took a slow sip. Brent had it surveyed. That portion falls on our side. We simply improved it. Show me the survey. It's filed. Then you won't mind emailing it to me. She smiled, and it wasn't friendly this time. Maybe check your own documents. That night I pulled every paper from my closing file. Deed, plot map, official county survey with stamped corners marked by iron pins. I walked the line with a metal detector and found the original markers buried just under the grass, exactly where I remembered them, exactly where the deed said they'd be. Which meant Brent had looked at my property, decided I probably wouldn't fight back, and built right over it. I called him the next morning. You've got 48 hours to remove the asphalt and the fence. He actually laughed. We made permanent improvements to our property. If you've got a problem, Nate, call a lawyer. There's something about being told that, in your own driveway, that flips a switch inside you. So I called a lawyer. Linda Carver, property attorney, late 50s, reading glasses on a chain, zero interest in drama. She flipped through my documents and nodded slowly. You're right, they built on your land. So we file? We file, but understand something. These things don't move fast. Months sometimes. Months. Meanwhile, every single day I had to look at that fence cutting through my yard like a permanent insult. That was when the idea started forming. Because here's what Brent hadn't thought through. Even with his illegal asphalt and his decorative fence, the land was still legally mine, which meant I could use it. I didn't have to wait quietly while the paperwork moved at its own pace. The first opportunity came naturally. I had a commercial mulch job starting that Tuesday, 15 cubic yards, dump truck at 7 in the morning. I met the driver at the curb. See that new blacktop next door? Back it up right there and drop it. He looked uncertain. You sure? Positive. The truck rumbled into position, the tailgate lifted, and a mountain of dark brown mulch cascaded down across that stolen section, perfectly centered, completely blocking Brent's new access point. I didn't rush to move it. At 7:22, their front door flew open. Brent came out in a gray bathrobe, hair standing up, fury all over his face. What the hell is this? Mulch, I said calmly, for a client. You dumped it on our driveway. I pointed to the survey stakes I'd remarked with bright orange flags. I dumped it on my property. You're blocking our vehicles. Then I guess you'll have to use your original driveway. He stepped closer and lowered his voice. Move it. I'll get to it when my schedule allows. He came closer still. You're being petty. I smiled a little. No, Brent, I'm being accurate. He called the police within the hour. 2 officers showed up, walked the line, looked at my stamped survey copy. One of them scratched his head. Sir, he said to Brent, this appears to be his property. Brent said I was blocking access. The officer shrugged. Maybe you shouldn't have connected it to his land. The mulch sat there for 3 full days. It rained once, which made it heavier and slightly messier. Brent glared at it every time he walked past. Elise left a typed note on my fence. Neighborhood standards matter. Please act responsibly. I kept the note. It still makes me laugh. When I finally moved the mulch for my actual job, Brent looked genuinely relieved. That relief lasted exactly 4 days. The next delivery was gravel, 10 tons of it. I scheduled it for a Friday afternoon, knowing they had guests coming that evening. The pile that landed on that asphalt was magnificent. taller than the fence, wide enough to make maneuvering around it completely impossible. Brent stormed over before the dust settled. "This is harassment." "This is storage," I said, brushing stone dust off my jeans. "You're doing this on purpose." I paused. "You built on my property on purpose." That one landed. He called the police again. Same result. Civil matter, my property. Over the following week, I used that strip constantly. Pallets of pavers, stacked timbers, my trailer parked diagonally across it when I felt like it. Each thing I placed there was a daily reminder that a piece of paper with an official stamp still meant something in this country. But I'd be lying if I said the standoff wasn't wearing on me. There's a strange, grinding tension that settles into your life when you're at war with someone who shares your fence line. Every trash day felt loaded. Every time I stepped outside, I wondered what I'd find. One evening, I overheard Brent in his backyard talking loudly to someone. "He's running a commercial operation. I'm filing complaints with zoning." So it had expanded. It wasn't just about parking anymore. It was about control. He wanted the street polished and curated and managed, and I was the inconvenient holdout with a truck and gravel and dirt under my nails. A week later, a certified letter arrived. He was suing me. Claimed I was damaging his improved driveway access, interfering with property enjoyment, creating nuisance conditions. I drove straight to Linda's office and dropped it on her desk. She skimmed it, unimpressed. "Good," she said. "That speeds things up. We countersue for encroachment, trespass, demand full restoration. Judges don't like self-help property grabs." That phrase stayed with me. Self-help property grabs. That was exactly what he'd done. He hadn't wanted to dispute anything. He'd wanted a quiet takeover. Around that time, I added what I'll call my third and most theatrical move. I had a large landscaping contract coming up that required a portable toilet on the job site. I rented one, bright blue, OSHA compliant, and technically I was permitted to store job equipment temporarily on my own property while a contract was active. I placed it right along the property line, squarely on the contested strip, door facing their patio. When it was delivered, Elise came outside with her phone already recording. "This is unbelievable," she said. "It's OSHA compliant," I replied. "Safety first." For 2 weeks, that portable toilet stood like a monument to stubbornness. Delivery drivers asked questions. Some neighbors whispered. Others, the older ones who'd been on the street a long time, gave me quiet thumbs up when they caught my eye. One evening, Mr. Halpern from across the street shuffled over. "Son," he said quietly, "don't let them push you. We all saw what they did." That meant more than he probably realized. The court date was set for early spring. By then, the asphalt had cracked in a few places from the weight I'd put on it. The fence leaned slightly where the survey flags marked its trespass. The tension had hardened into something cold and steady inside me. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Fluorescent lights, wood paneling that had seen better decades, the faint smell of old paper and burnt coffee. No drama, just a handful of chairs, a clerk typing steadily, and a judge who looked like he'd heard every neighbor dispute imaginable. Brent sat at the opposite table in a navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. When he finally looked at me, what I saw wasn't anger. It was annoyance, like I'd inconvenienced him by not folding sooner. Brent's attorney went first, arguing that his clients had relied on a reasonable boundary assessment before making improvements. He painted a picture of a hard-working couple investing in their property, targeted by a hostile neighbor running a disruptive commercial operation. Disruptive commercial operation? I trim lawns and spread mulch. I'm not running a refinery. When it was our turn, Linda didn't raise her voice or dramatize anything. She simply handed up the certified county survey, the deed, photographs of the original iron boundary pins, and timestamps showing the paving crew working while I was on a job site out of town. Then she asked the question that shifted the entire atmosphere in the room. "Your Honor, may we see the survey the defendants relied upon before construction?" Brent shifted in his chair. His attorney handed over a single sheet of paper. It wasn't stamped. It wasn't certified. It wasn't drawn by a licensed surveyor. It was a rough sketch with handwritten measurements, apparently produced by a contractor Brent had hired with a tape measure and what appeared to be a printout from an online satellite image. The judge adjusted his glasses and stared at it for a long moment. "Is this an official survey?" Brent's attorney cleared his throat. "It was conducted by a professional." "A licensed surveyor?" the judge interrupted. Silence. "No, Your Honor." The judge set the paper down on his desk carefully, like it might contaminate the surface. He looked at Brent. "You poured asphalt and erected a fence based on this?" Brent tried to hold his composure. "We believed in good faith." "Good faith," the judge said flatly, "would have involved confirming the property line before construction." There was no shouting, no dramatic gavel, just steady, unmistakable disapproval from the bench. When the ruling came, it was direct. Full restoration of my property to its prior condition. Removal of all asphalt encroachment. Removal of the fence section crossing the boundary. Payment of my legal fees and court costs. Then the judge added something that stayed with me long after I walked out of that building. "Property lines exist for a reason. Taking matters into your own hands is not how civilized disputes are resolved." Civilized. That word echoed in my head for days, because none of this had felt civilized while it was happening. It had felt personal, tense, like a Cold War conducted in gravel and certified letters. The restoration order gave Brent 30 days. The fence came down first. I watched from my garage as contractors unbolted the panels and pulled the posts out of the ground. The decorative black metal that had once stood like a territorial marker now lay stacked awkwardly on his lawn. The asphalt removal took longer. They had to cut clean lines, then jackhammer the section that crossed onto my land. The sound echoed through the neighborhood for 2 solid days. Concrete dust floated through the air like fine gray fog. I won't pretend there was no satisfaction in watching that fresh pavement come apart. But it wasn't joy exactly. It was more like watching balance return to something that had been tilted wrong for too long. When they finished, I had my gravel back. It needed regrading, fresh stone, some smoothing, but it was mine again. Brent avoided eye contact for weeks. Elisa stopped hosting dinner parties for a while. The silver SUVs stayed neatly within the boundaries of their original driveway. The blue portable toilet disappeared the day after the ruling. Its work was done. Here's the part that surprised me most. Winning didn't feel explosive. It felt quiet. One evening, a few weeks after everything was restored, I was standing in my driveway at sunset. Truck parked where it had always belonged, gravel freshly leveled, the air finally light. Brent came out to his mailbox. For a moment, we just stood there across the invisible line that had caused so much. He hesitated. Then he said, "You could have just talked to us." I let that sit for a second. "I did," I said, "before the asphalt." He didn't respond. There's a narrative that people like Brent carry around, that if you move with enough confidence, if you act certain enough, the world will simply adjust itself around you. That other people will yield to avoid conflict. And honestly, most of the time, they're probably right. But sometimes they run into someone who has nothing flashy and nothing polished, just paperwork, patience, and a refusal to be erased quietly. The neighborhood settled after that. Mr. Halpern still waves when I drive by. Brent and I are civil now, not friendly, just civil. And every so often, when I back my trailer down that side stretch and feel the gravel under the tires, I think about how close I came to letting it go. How easy it would have been to tell myself it wasn't worth the stress, the attorney fees, the daily friction of looking at that fence and swallowing it. 10 feet isn't much until it is. Because if I had given him that strip quietly, what would have been next? A zoning complaint about my equipment, pressure about the truck, a slow campaign to make me feel like I didn't belong on my own street. Sometimes these disputes aren't really about land at all. They're about who gets to belong. I didn't fight for gravel. I fought for the right to exist in a space I had paid for and earned. Now here's the question I've been sitting with ever since. Did I escalate things? Absolutely. Was the mulch petty? Sure. Was the portable toilet excessive? Probably. But would Brent have backed down without resistance? I genuinely don't think so. So I'll leave it to you. If someone builds across your property line and dares you to call a lawyer, do you wait quietly? Or do you make sure they feel every inch they tried to take? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I genuinely want to hear where you stand on this. And if you've ever dealt with a neighbor who confused confidence with ownership, share that story too, because you're not alone. Hit like if you believe property lines matter. Subscribe if you want more real stories about ordinary people who refuse to be quietly pushed around. Because sometimes justice isn't loud. Sometimes it's 10 feet of gravel reclaimed.